Hello everybody, my name is Nhlanhla Ndlovu. Um, I'm a 2013 Activator. I'm very excited to be doing this video for you guys. I want to be talking about economic inclusion for youth in South Africa and just the importance of it. And just looking at the State of the Nation address, as well as the fact that the state of the youth is indeed the state of the nation, because the youth makes up so much of the population of the country. Now, before we go ahead, what I want to do is really define the territory that we're working on. So what is economic inclusion? Economic inclusion really talks to the provision of necessary opportunities for youth to participate meaningfully in the life of our economy. Really, economic inclusion talks to impact, it talks to social issues, it talks to the fact that it talks to human dignity, really. And we need to understand this so that as I go ahead and begin to unpack the realities behind economic inclusion, economic exclusion, as well as financial exclusion, that you understand exactly what we're talking about, that you understand the territory, and that you don't get confused and that I don't lose you along the way. So essentially what I want to get to is, what does economic exclusion do to us as young people and as a country? It is important that we understand this. So what there's an organization called CIPE. These guys, in their definition of economic inclusion, they say it refers to equality of opportunities for all members of the country to participate in the economic life of the country as employers, as entrepreneurs, as consumers and citizens, close quote. Now, the current economic structure, or the current structure of economic exclusion rather, has affected things like unemployment, local economic development, and this with a specific focus on rural areas and townships across South Africa, and also has affected economic opportunities, really. Basically to say that youth are closed out from economic opportunities and accessing them in order for them to be able to make a living for themselves. Now, you must understand that because South Africa has a history of apartheid, economic inclusion or economic exclusion really is a result of spatial inequalities that were entrenched under the previous regime of apartheid. And spatial inequalities, this talks to the issue that there's rural areas, there's cities, there's semi-urban and urban areas, and these create different economies in our country, and that is the reality. And because of these spatial inequalities, we found ourselves in a situation now where government and private organizations and I'm talking about economic inclusion as a way forward, really, for a radical economic transformation. Now, also the spatial inequalities has created differentials, between homelands and the rest of South Africa. It has created differentials between semi-urban and urban areas, between cities and townships. And as a result, South Africa is currently living under a situation where we have two parallel or dual economies. And this is essentially, because of apartheid, and I want to be blunt about it, there's a white economy and there's a black economy. And this is a legacy of apartheid. And so you have essentially what's happening is that our economy runs in two parallel economies, but they are not equal. In such a way that you have the banking sector, you have the banking sector which really provides for the needs of the developed white economy and excludes the needs of the black underdeveloped economy. And so the reason we are now talking about economic inclusion is precisely because we want to create equality where inequality is so rampant in our country. Guys, economic inclusion really is about providing opportunities. That's what it is. It is about providing opportunities for us young people to be able to access, all right, gain access into the economic mainstream, for us to be able to make a living, for us to participate meaningfully in the economic life of our country. And this, the goal for this is to equalize the spatial differentials that exist in our country. So what are the effects of economic exclusion and indeed financial exclusion? Now, the reason I separate the two is because economic inclusion speaks to the general idea of our economy. It speaks to the lack of opportunities. It speaks to the fact that young people are not able to access opportunities to make a living for themselves. Financial exclusion speaks directly to the banking sector or the finance sector in our country. It speaks to issues of the fact that the four major banks in our country, which by the way own about, if not more than 84% of the banking sector's assets. And these guys do not have any products that speak to closing the gap where financial exclusion happens. Now, you guys will remember the last year in 2016, the year ended with a funny thing where Golf R became, or we now call it Vorpa. And I mean, many jokes were made about it. It was Kumba, the comedian, made jokes about it for the power. Activator has its own comedians who are doing comedy about it for the power, and it was really a funny spat. But you must understand that the essence of that story, and the reason I'm bringing it up here, is to make a point on financial exclusion. So how this came about was, a gentleman on Twitter made a tweet, and he said on that tweet that it is sad how black South Africans would go for a 700,000 rand loan and buy a Golf R, not knowing that for the same amount of money you could actually afford to buy yourself a fish and chips, for example, franchise, which gives you, within 2-3 years, starts making a profit and creates a passive income for you for a lifetime, really, if you take care of the asset. And some gentleman replied to this tweet, which was a funny one, and he said, but if fish and chips doesn't make the sound vrpa. But guys, this should show you the financial exclusion that exists in South Africa, that because of spatial differences, we find ourselves in a situation where for a young black man, for a young black woman, it is so much easier to buy assets that are not building you wealth, that are not building you any asset at all, actually. It is so much easier to gain such products, such luxuries in life. And yet the financial sector does not have financial services really that speak to asset building loans and asset building financial services, and this is due to financial exclusion that exists in our country. And it is important for us to fight this. It is important for us to understand that we can no longer be happy to be driving big Porsche cars that are not making us any money, that are not building any legacy for our families going forward. We need to start fighting this. Now, you guys also need to understand that in our country, there's about at least 12 million South Africans who do not have bank accounts, who are eligible, who are in their years to have bank accounts. 12 million people do not have bank accounts. And of the ones that do have bank accounts, many of them who are black and are young do not have access to proper financial services that actually build them wealth, that create opportunities, that put opportunities at the center in order for them to be able to create a living for themselves. And still those that do have access, they do not really have access to financial services that build them financially building assets. Financial exclusion, that's what it is. This exists precisely because of our dual economy. Now, if you take a white counterpart, all right, and you bring them to a bank and they have a business idea, chances are that they will have a few up and downs, but they will eventually get the funding. But for a black person, for a young black person, it takes much longer, and if indeed you do get it, you get it when you're extremely tired, and you need to have a persistent attitude to be able to get it. So this is the situation in our country today. So economic inclusion is really an important topic for us to be talking about. Now, I want to give you guys a couple of stats, just to open up your minds to the reality that we're living in, just for you guys to understand what is going on in our country, why economic inclusion is such an important part of our fight for a radical economic transformation. Now, 75% of all small businesses that are started fail within their first 2 years of existence. All businesses that are small, about 75% of them, fail within their first 2 years. Now, this exists due to a number of factors that are there, but there are fundamental flaws in the structure that currently exists that creates this. And it is precisely due to economic exclusion and financial exclusion. We have a population of about 56 million people in our country. To be precise, according to Stats SA, about 55.53 million people. Our population increases at a steady rate of about 1.8% per annum. And out of this population, about 48% of our population are of working age. South Africa defines a working age as between the ages 18 to 64. So that means about 52% are dependent. This could be children, this could be old people above the age of 64. So more people are dependent than the people who are able to work or who are employable, who can actually go out there and make a living for themselves. But of this 48% that is employable and can work, there's an unemployment rate of about 26%. So you take 48% employable populace or population in our country, and you minus 26%, and you are left with about half of our population that is able to work, that is sitting at home and not doing anything and not making a living for themselves. No wonder our GDP is not growing. Our GDP is currently sitting at less than 0%, which means we are not growing. In fact, for the past 5-6 years, our GDP has been decreasing steadily from 3.5% to now 0% annual growth in our GDP. This means that per household, each household, if you calculate, has to live at least on less than 500 rands per month to feed the entire family, to live, have clothes, have food, have warmth, have shelter, have basic human needs that a family needs for them to live. So it is important for us to understand these statistics, because as we speak about economic inclusion, and we speak about the power and the social impact that the fight for economic inclusion will have, we then begin to understand why it is so important for us not only to have a conversation about it, but to actually start doing something about it. Now, the 26%, by the way, it just is about South Africans. Now, if you had to add, or the extended unemployment rate, it's about 35-36%. And the extended is because if you add our brothers and sisters from outside of South African borders, and this is not just Africa alone, but everyone who's outside of our borders and live in South Africa and are unemployed fall under the bracket of extended unemployment rate, which is about 35-36% at the moment. Now, here's a staggering fact, and I need your mind and your eyes and your ears and your hearts to be open to this statistic. This is an important bit of information. Of the 26% that is currently unemployed, about 60% are black youth. I want it to sink in. I want it to be important. I want it to resonate with you, because you must understand that if such a staggering number of young black people are sitting and are unable to make a living for themselves because they are economically excluded, we have a problem. 60% of young black people are not participating in our economy's life, and that is the reality. Now guys, you must understand that economic exclusion does not only just speak to color, it speaks to gender issues, it speaks to sexual orientation issues. So the LGBTI community too gets unfairly excluded from economic activity precisely because they have chosen a different sexual orientation that they relate with. And this is a problem in our country. And this creates further our spatial differentials. And this is an incredible issue. Now guys, I want to get to the final part of my talk with you. And that is, first of all, is economic inclusion possible? Is it possible for youth to fight to create a situation in our economy where opportunities are created for us to be able to go out there and make a living for ourselves, but not only that, but to create a legacy for our people and for generations to come? Is it possible? I believe it is. The next thing is, how do we do it? Now, I want you to know an important bit of information about small businesses and how important they are for the future of our economy. South Africa currently sits at a percentage of about 60% of small businesses, or rather, that small businesses employ 60% of our population. So that means that the 20-odd% of South Africans that are currently employed are absorbed by small businesses. This could be exciting, but really it is a horrible number when you begin to compare with our counterparts in other countries out there. You look at China, you look at Brazil, you look at India and other countries. Their small businesses are absorbing between 80 to 90% of their population. 80 to 90% of their population. So we're 20 to 30% shy of achieving our goal in South Africa. And there's a reason that this is so, and it is precisely because small businesses, during the SONA and during the budget speech, small businesses are put in the forefront. SMMEs are put in the forefront, and there's 3.5 billion rands going towards SMME development. The Department of Economic Development is getting about 3.5 billion rands. Companies are having enterprise development funding that they are taking and giving it to organizations, consulting companies to develop small businesses, to develop entrepreneurs, to be able to access opportunities. And so much money is being spent out there for the development of small businesses. But here is where the problem lies. Where is that money being spent? I find personally as a consultant, and I work within the space of enterprise development, that money is being spent on the wrong people. Remember guys, the dual economy that exists in our country, a lot of financial services have been given to a developed economy. They've been basically, an egg is being thrown at poor people, and the joke is on us. Whenever big corporations and government throws big amounts and saying that this money is going towards developing small businesses, developing opportunities for people to access and be able to create a living for themselves, all that they're saying is that the joke is on you, because that money essentially is going to go to some posh city in Johannesburg, it's going to go to Sandton, it's going to go to some consulting company in Cape Town, some posh place there in Durban, and you find that the reality is a lot of our innovative young entrepreneurs are not sitting in these spaces. First of all, the fight is the fact that it is a rather intimidating environment to go to in the first place. But then if you are looking at the poor people who are not working, who do not have resource, and you're giving them a process where a young person, a young woman who has a great idea for a business, who lives in rural KZN, who must take a taxi from wherever she lives with the money she doesn't have, by the way, drive all the way for half a day to get to Durban, and get to Durban sweaty, smelly, clothes all rugged up, tired, and to be told that you need a business plan and she must go back home all on her own with money that she didn't have for another half a day, go back, work on that business plan, come back another day, spend money she doesn't have, to be told there's something else that is wrong. Basically, she's going to be doing this for the next 5, 10, 15 to 20 times before she can be considered fund ready. Even then, there are other processes that she must still do. There's still compliance. There's still other issues that she must deal with to be able to be fund ready and for her to access an opportunity. And this is a problem. This is a problem because partial differentials put us young black people in a situation where we cannot access opportunities because we are so far from them. And our government and the private sector, they're so very comfortable with the fact that it's okay, we will spend our money on these cities, we will spend our money on urban areas, and you young black man, you young black woman must simply come to where the money is. But that cannot be the status quo, and we cannot be happy with it. Things must change. There's an organization called SAELO, South Africa. They released a white paper on the power of small business in our country in a culturally diverse economy. And the idea basically that they were driving forward is the fact that small business is the future of our country. Socialism is the future of our country. And socialism speaks to the development of small businesses. Now, economic inclusion requires us young people to become radical about disruption. I had the privilege of being in a conference where a business person was speaking, and he defined disruption in business with 3 things. That disruption basically is doing something better, faster, cheaper. For me as a business person, that makes sense, right? When I offer services and I look at my competitors and I look at how can I gain market share, I want to disrupt business by doing things better, faster, cheaper. But for us young people to access opportunities, disruption means an entirely different thing for us. It doesn't mean cheaper, it doesn't mean faster, it doesn't mean better. It means that we're actually disrupting in the natural definition of the word. We want to disrupt markets, we want to disrupt the way things happen, we want to disrupt the status quo. We cannot do business as usual. We cannot go to parliament, listen to the SONA, and just simply be happy that we're sitting with 26% of unemployment rate, we're sitting with 75% of all small businesses that are starting failing in their first 2 years of their existence. We cannot be happy with this. We cannot be happy that enterprise and supply development spend is being spent on cities and urban areas and excluded our townships and rural areas. This is a big problem, and we need to disrupt. You see, as young people, we are apologetic in South Africa, and I think this is something that needs to change. We need to stop being apologetic. We need to start demanding that which is ours. There was a court ruling some time ago in the Constitutional Court, and the judge said, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting this, but he spoke about the fact that it is a human rights issue when a man or woman is unable to make a living for themselves, to feed himself and feed his or her family. It is a human rights issue. In the human rights in our Constitution, a basic human right is that of dignity. And if you do not have money to live, to clothe yourself, to keep yourself warm, to feed yourself, dignity is out the window. Instead, you are prey. You and I fall prey to humiliation, to degradation, to spats of our egos getting shut down. It is a basic human rights issue, and we need to understand the impact behind economic inclusion. That if we are fighting for social change, that if in your pocket, in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve as an activator, whatever it is you're trying to achieve as a human being, as a young South African in your community, understand that economic inclusion has to form part of your strategic moves going forward. That whenever you fight for issues of HIV, for poverty, for drug abuse, for abuse at home, physical abuse, mental abuse, all kinds of social issues that we're trying to fight, economic emancipation is a big issue. And we can no longer sit back and simply be comfortable with the status quo. Radical transformation calls just for that, radical. If we're not radical, we cannot go forward. Transformation is actually a combination of two words, trans and formation. Trans means from, formation means to. So we're basically having a radical process of moving from one thing to another. And that one thing is the economy, where we are transforming radically our economic situation. The fundamental problem is the structure and the spatial inequalities that exist in South Africa. So let us fight. Let us fight. Let us fight to decrease the 26%. Let us fight to decrease the 74%. And how we do this, guys, there are many campaigns we can start. We can start campaigns where we move into, Limpopo has mines all over the place, and Mpumalanga has mines all over the place. Gauteng has industrial areas and some mines. The Eastern Cape is a farming community, is a farming province. The Northwest, the Free State, the Western Cape are farming communities and provinces. We need to begin to say to ourselves, how do we access opportunities? And once we've identified these opportunities, let us access ways to build ourselves into those opportunities in order for us to start making money. It is important that we do not shy away from these things. I want to give you the stat. The fact that Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Northwest, Free State, Northern Cape, they're largely farming provinces and KZN, and yet there are no young black people who own agro-processing plants, no young people who own markets within farming. Many young people who actually own farms in these areas are not even South African. So this begs the question, what are we doing? So we cannot just leave it to government. We cannot just leave it to private corporations. Money is there. Just yesterday I was at a conference and I spoke to a lady who's managing some of enterprise development monies that corporates are giving them to supply to small businesses. And she was saying money is there. The problem is that entrepreneurs are not fund worthy. So let us fight that these corporations fund organizations in our own spaces, in rural areas, in townships, and they speak to us and they come down to our level and they teach us and they help us to resource us, so that we can become fund ready, so that we can become ready for an opportunity. And the last thing, we're not fighting for funding, we're simply fighting for opportunities. Funding will come as a result of an opportunity existing. So guys, I hope you absolutely enjoyed the video. I hope that you guys have learned a few things, but most importantly, I hope that you guys are taking resolutions to take the fight out there and bring back what is originally ours. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your training. From Nhlanhla Ndlovu, I'm out.